What?
All right, we are on Samach Hey towards the top,
Oh,
4 lines from the
Aleph,
top.
Amud Aleph?
Samach Hey Amid Aleph.
Okay,
Yeah.
I
So
have it.
yesterday's daf was Samach Hey, today's daf is Samach Vav. We'll do what
Okay.
we can to get through both of them.
Mhm.
So yesterday's, meaning Friday's daf, was very, very complicated, very technical, and one towards the end, one of the prominent features of the daf had to do with this ton of debate around Chizkiah that had to do with, it was a complicated klal pratu klal and rebo miyut riboy, and when all the dust settled, we had a pasuk with a few extra words, and one of the ways that the Gemara used one of the extra words was to kind of reference this idea of Rav that really the Gemara is now going to pick up. So the point is the Gemara is going to pick up on something that it kind of mentioned on Friday on Daf Samach Daled Amud Beis, and now we're really going to do a deep dive. So that's really where we're picking up. 4 lines from the top. Gufa Amar Rav. So the Gemara says, okay, Gufa Amar Rav, this halacha of Rav, the Kiddush of Rav. Rav said like this: Heren ke'ein shaganav, tashlume kefel, tashlume arba v'chamisha, keshas hamad bedin. So when a person steals something, he has to pay, certainly has to repay the karen. He also has to pay the kefel. And in certain instances, he has to pay the should be arba v'chamisha. So if he shechs the item, or if he sells the item, if it's a shar or a set. And Rav's Kiddush is like this: that when I pay back the karen, I pay it back according to its value at the time when I stole it. But when we calculate my penalty payment, either my payfel or my tashumi arba v'chamisha, we look at it later in time. Kshas hamad bedin. Now, one thing is worth just speaking out from the get-go, which is if the actual item that I stole is still here. Let's focus on kefil for a second, not tashumi arba v'chamisha, which then by definition it's not here. I've shechted it or I've sold it. If the item is still here, I'm just going to repay the item. So we don't really care how much it's worth, even if it's worth a whole lot less than when I stole it. I have the option to say, "Here is your thing right back." Right, and we'll see an example on Amud Beis. Let's say, for example, if I steal chametz sha'ar leva pesach, so now it's not worth anything because Pesach's over, right, and it's chametz. I'm still allowed to just give that right back. What Rav is talking about over here is the item is not here. Right? For whatever reason, the item is gone, and therefore I'm paying cash. And the question is, how much cash am I paying? This item clearly fluctuated in value, whatever I stole. And the question is, when we value, how much do I have to pay back? Is it the value when I stole it, or is it the value today? And Rav's Kiddush is that when we're focusing on the karen, that we look back to the time when I stole it. But as it relates to valuing the knas, whether it's kefel or daled v'hei, that we look later in time at the Shas Hamad Bedin. So the Gemara says, my time with the Rav. So how does Rav know this? Why does he say this? So Amar Kra, he learns it off from a pasuk. It says Gneva B'chaim. So this was the pasuk that was really being darshaned in Friday's daf. The pasuk says, Im himasi timatze biyado aganev mishar chamar atzeh chaim shnayim mishalim. There's a few extra words here. Gneva and chaim. Amai kamar achmana chaim b'gneva achaya. Lekaren ke'in shagana. The word chaim is almost being used to say that we revive the value of this item to go kishas geneva. So again, the assumption is that for some reason this thing may have gone down in value or whatever it is, and therefore we have to look back to the time in which the geneva occurred to repay the karen. But again, what's the chiddush of Rav? The chiddush of Rav is that when you steal something and the thing is no longer here, so I got to repay the guy using cash. When it comes to valuing the karen, I have to pay the value of the item when I stole it. When it comes to valuing the knas, then we value it based on the shas hamad bedin. Okay. Amar of Shesha. Shesha says, Amina kinayim meshachav Rav Amar lo shmaita. I want to say that when Rav stood over this halacha, he was kind of feeling sleepy. Meaning, I don't really agree with this halacha. I think there's a problem with this halacha. Tanya, because I have a Mufurish Brisa that goes against this halacha of Rav. The Brisa says as follows: Chusha v'heshmeina, a guy stole an animal and it was in some sort of weakened state, v'heshmeina, and then all of a sudden the Gana kind of invested in this animal and he fattened this animal. So when we value how much the daled v'hei is for this animal, we don't look at the current value, which is much more than it was when I stole it. We go back to the time in which I stole it. But this seems to contradict Raz Halacha said that when we talk about the valuing the knas, we value the knas at now, in the later in time, the Shas Hamad B'Din.
Well,
Not.
I don't think it's such a zero because you're talking about two different entities. In the first case, you're talking about K'Ainch, like the way it is.
Yeah.
If it's the same consistent item and the marketplace element
Exactly.
is different. In the second case, which is brought as the steer of the Gemara, the person himself invested the value.
Exactly.
So it's not really a question.
That's exactly what the Gemara is going to answer. Very good. So the Gemara says, Amri, Mishum de Amar Le, Anap Patimna Ba'at Shaklis. What are you talking about? The Ganav has a Koach HaTaina, right? The Ganav can say, listen, I invested, I'm not paying you 4 times what I invested, right? That doesn't make any sense. So, but very good. So Tashma, another kasha, but it's going to be kind of similar lines. Tashma, Shmeina B'Chisha. Let's say we had an animal. So Mark, we are about halfway down on Samachay Amid Aleph. Tashma, second word on the line. Shmeina B'Chisha. Let's say we had an animal that was healthy, right? And then B'Chisha, I steal the animal, and now I work it really hard, and now the animal loses its value because I've been putting it to work for the last 6 months. So again, when we value what I have to pay in terms of the dollar pay, we look back to the value when it was at the shas of the gneva. But again, right, Rav's halacha is when we do the dollar pay, we look at it at the time of Hamad B'Din. So why do we? Why are we kind of penalizing the ganav over here and making him pay kishas haganav? We should have to pay kishas Hamad B'Din. But again, the Gemara says a very similar svara. Hasanami, Mishum Dabrin Le, Mali Katla Kula, Mali Katla Palga. And the idea over here is that when we say, right, Kishas Hamada Bedin, when I shech the animal, that's kind of when we're going to view the value of this animal. So let's say I stole the animal in January 1st and it was worth whatever. And then I shech the animal February 1st and then it's worth whatever. And the Hamada Bedin is now in April. We're not going to look at what it's worth now in April. That's silly, right? Now it's worth nothing. It's all sold. It's all eaten. It's all whatever. So we look back to the time of the Shechita, and that's when we say, what was it worth as of, I don't know, whatever day I said, February 1st, right? So when I killed the animal, when I shechted the animal, the Nignav over here has a very similar svar. And you can say, listen, I get the animal still alive, but when you started weakening the animal, when you started working the animal, that's when you started, killing the animal. So the same way that when you shecht it, that's when we would look at, what the value is. When you start weakening the animal, that's when we should start looking, you were weakening this animal be a dime. So it's kind of it's the mirror image of the svara from the last question, right? You don't have the right to weaken my animal and then say, I only want to pay you the smaller amount. No, of course not. You got to pay what it was worth. So again, this is not really a kasha on Rav. And like you said, right, Kika Amar Rav's whole halacha was b'yukra v'zuluhu to Amar. Rav's whole halacha was where market forces are at play, and that's what's really changing the value of this animal. It's not actions of the ganav one way or another. It's not the ganav making it worth more. It's not the ganav making it worth less. It's where the price of livestock fluctuates, and therefore now we have to figure out what is the right amount that this ganav needs to pay the nignav. So the Gemara says, fine, it was market forces. But how do these market forces work? So when I stole it, it was worth a zuz. Now we're a month or two later and the market went wild and there's inflation, and now it's worth 4 times that. So Karen, K'ain Shaganav, you're telling me that when we value the Karen, we go back to the 1 zuz, lema plika, to Rav Adarava. This halacha of Rav would conflict with something that Rava said. The Amar Rava, Hi man, the Gazal Chavisa, the Chamra Mechabre. If a person steals a barrel of wine from his friend, and Meikara Shavya Zuzo, Lebasov Shavya Dalet Zuzi, and if initially it was worth a zuz, and now it's worth 4 zuz, the halacha is like this: Tavra o Shusia, right? If the person, the Ganav, breaks the barrel, or he drinks it, so then Mishalim Dalit, but Itvar Memela Mishalim Zuz. But if the barrel breaks on its own, something happened to it passively, he's only going to pay a Zuz. So what exactly is the question? So again, this really goes to kind of what we spoke out in the beginning, which is when I steal something, and so long as there hasn't been some sort of change or some sort of shinui that we'll talk about later in today's daf, the reality is it has a very weird status of Allah. On the one hand, as a ganav, I didn't really make a kinyan on this item, right? It's not mine. right? On the other hand, I'm responsible for certain things. If there's an onus, something happens to it, I'm responsible to pay back the guy. So the point is like this: when I steal, focus on the case of the barrel of wine, Rava's case. When I steal a barrel of wine, so long as I don't touch the barrel of wine, so long as the barrel of wine is still there, the fact that it went up in value, it still really belongs to its rightful owner. So if I stole the wine from Randy, it's Randy's wine. And if the wine was worth 1 when I stole it, and now it's worth 4, and it's still sitting in my basement, it's Randy's wine that's worth 4. When I drink it, when I break the barrel, that's the way Rashi explains, that's the Gneva. That's really when it now leaves Randy's Rishus and comes into my Rishus. And at that point, it's worth 4. So I should have to pay Randy 4.
Is the Gemara saying that my seizing, if you will, that item only takes place once I actually use it?
Essentially, meaning there's no question I'm going to have certain responsibilities to watch it, right? Even before I drink it. But the point is what Rashi's saying, and I think what the question of the Gemara is saying is, but when I drink it, that is like the Geneva. So when we're saying I should pay the Karen, Ke'ein Shagana, what we're saying is the Karen should be valued at 4, not 1. The fact that I stole it when it was 1 doesn't mean as much as when I drank it, when I broke the thing, it was worth 4, and that's what I should really be paying. So bringing that back to Rav's case, when Rav says, if the way we're understanding Rav's Kiddush is that when market forces are at play, and I stole something that was worth 1, and then I shefted it or whatever it is when it was worth 4, and the Karen, we value the Karen, I have to pay 1. But when we value the Knas, the Tvicha, the Mechir, the Dalad Ve'eh, I have to pay 4. That goes against his Kiddush of Rabbah, because Rabbah would tell you that when I shech the animal, that's the same thing as me drinking the wine. And the same way that when I drink the wine, if it's now worth 4, I owe 4. When I shech the animal, even the Karen, forget the Kefal and the Dalad Ve'eh, even the Karen, I should have to pay 4. Because you're right, when I stole it, it was only worth 1, but I didn't touch the animal, meaning the animal was just in my pen. When I shechted it, that's really when I do the Gneva. That's when I really owe him the money. Now it's worth 4. So to the extent the market forces cause the thing to go up in value, I shouldn't, even valuing the Karen, I shouldn't have to pay Kashas Hagan of the original Gneva. I should have to pay Kashas Hamad Abedin. I should have to pay the higher price right now. So that's the kasha the Gemara has on Rav.
Would that apply if the market value made a decrease in value?
I mean, you're one step ahead. So far.
If on the upside I get penalized, I mean, even though we're trying to be, whatever, it should be the opposite too.
Exactly. So the Gemara says you're right. That case, Rav's halacha wouldn't apply. Kika Amar Rav's halacha is going to make Kara Shabi Dalid. Rav's whole halacha is only in a case where the market forces went the opposite direction. If when I stole it was worth 4, and now it's only worth 1. So Karen Ke'ein Shagana. I guess we just penalize the Gana. And we say that when it comes to valuing the Karen, you still need to pay the 4. But the Tashumi Kefal, the Tashumi Arba V'chamisha, Tishas Hamad Abedin. But when it comes to the Knas, when it comes to the Kefal and the Dalad Ve'eh, we allow you to pay this lower price of the Zuz that it is today. So we started the Daf with this halacha of Rav, that anytime I steal, and anytime I have to pay cash, right, the Karen is Ke'ein Shaganav, and the Knas is Shas Hamad Abedin, we've now whittled away at this Chiddush. It only applies when there are market forces at play, not when the Ganav himself caused the value to go up or down. And even when we say market forces, it's only if they go in one direction. If, for whatever reason, the price of livestock went up, then again, Raz halacha doesn't apply. It only applies when the price of livestock goes down. And the Gemara says, Tani Rav Chanina l'siyuei d'Rav. Rav Chanina actually had a brisa supporting Rav. So again, this is a halacha that we actually saw a lot yesterday, but let's just, chazer real quick. If we got someone who's a shomer pikadon, let's just go with a simple case, a shomer chinim. Shomer chinim's got something. Shomer chinim is putter if anything happens to this item, unless he was a total pusher. But if it was Gneva, Veda, he's going to be putter. Let's say the shomer chinim is a bad guy and he steals it, but he claims that someone else stole it. Right? So he's towing Tainus Gan. Right? The halacha is like this. If he himself comes clean, first of all, he has to take a shvua. He takes a shvua that he didn't touch it. He takes a shvua. Swears falsely. If he himself comes clean and says, I stole it, the halacha is as follows. He's chayiv to pay the Karen, He's chayav to pay a chomesh. He's also chayav to bring a carbon known as the asham gzelos. But he's not going to be chayav the kefel because the moda b'knas is pater. So because he was moda, he's not going to pay the kefel. If Adim come in and say, no, this guy stole it, now he's going to be chayav the kefel. What happens if both of the things happen? He's moda and there's Adim. So in theory, he can be chayav kefel, he can be chayav the chomesh, and he can be chayav the asham. We're in a three-way machlokas. What happens if both of these things happen? So again, Tani Rab Chanina l'chiyei derav. Bala bayis shatan tainis ganav b'pikadon. Right? You have a bala bayis. This is the shomer chinam, let's say, and he's towing tainis ganav b'pikadon. B'nishba, he swears. B'hod. But now he admits that he stole the item. Ubo Adam, and we also have Adam come. So the halacha is as follows: Adam hoda. If he was moed before the Adam came, so mishalim keren v'chomesh v'asham. He's going to pay the keren. He's going to pay the chomesh. He's going to have to bring a carbon. He's not going to pay the kefel because again, moda be'knas is pater. But be'im mishabo Adam hoda. But let's say the Adam came first, and then he was moda. So misham tashlomei kefel v'asham v'chom sha'ololo b'kefelu divrei Rabbi Yaakov. Essentially, you're going to owe all three. But Rabbi Yaakov has a chiddush, and he says like this: if the kefel and the chomesh happen to equal the same number, you only have to pay it once. Now, the Gemara, just to spoil the ending, the Gemara is going to say, how in the world can the kefel and the chomesh equal the same amount? Kefel, by definition, is double, and chomesh, by definition, is a fifth. So how could those two amounts? And what the Gemara is going to ultimately say is, market fluctuations happen, and therefore we can make it all work. That's going to be the raya around. But before we get there, there's two other sheets in the brisa. Chachamim omrim, Barosho b'chamishi sav. The pasuk says, Barosho b'chamishi sav. Mamon hamishtalim barosh most chomesh. Whenever I'm chayav to pay the keren, that's when I have to add the chomesh. But mamon she'ein mishtalim barosh. If I have to pay kefel, meaning I'm not only paying the keren, ein mosif chomesh. Then I'm not going to be chayav the chomesh. But even the chachamim, it's a technicality. They're saying you're not going to be chayav the chomesh because you're chayav kefel. But the chachamim are going to say that you are going to be chayav to bring a carbon asham. Rav Shimon ben Yochai, Rav Shimon ben Yochai is the third shita. Ein chomesh ve'asham mishtalim akum sheish kefel. They just argue on the chacham. They take it one step further, and they say anytime that you have kefel, not only are you now not obligated to pay the chomesh, you also don't even bring the carbon. But again, going back to the first shita, which is really going to be the raya to Rav, Katani mihat chumsha ololo b'kefela divrei Rabbi Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov's chiddush is that whenever the chomesh and the kefel equal the same dollar amount, you don't have to pay both of them. How in the world can you have a case where the chomesh and the kefel are the same? If it was worth 4 and now it's worth 4, meaning it hasn't fluctuated in value. So chumsha olalo b'kefelo, kefela arba, the chumsha zuza. The kefel is 4 and the chomesh is 1 zuz. Now it's worth pointing out over here that when we talk about a fifth, we mean a fifth in the Gemara's parlance. So the Gemara often uses the fifth, what's known as milabar. So what we would call a fourth, the Gemara calls a fifth. So don't get confused there. But the point is, it's 25% is what the Gemara calls a fifth. But the point is that a kefel can't be a quarter, right? One's double and one's a quarter. So what's going on over here? Milabar is outside and Milagav is inside. Yeah, so it's kind of a convoluted way.
125%.
Exactly. 25% is a fifth of 125. Exactly. Yeah. But again, we would normally call that a fourth, not a fifth. But either way, that's not the point. Elalav, we're at Samachem base. So Elalav, what's going on over here? Gemeikara Shavia Arba. This item must have been worth 4 originally. Well, it was so Shavia Zuza. Now it went down in value. Now it's only worth 1. Dikafela Zuza. When we talk about the Knas, we say the kefel is the zuz, but the chumsha zuza, and the fifth, right, the chomesh, we take off the keren. That's ke'ein shagana. That's looking at it when it was worth 4 zuzim, and now I can tell you that's why the chomesh and the kefel equal the same amount. Alma keren ke'ein shagana, and the shumei kefel, the shumei dalad v'hei kishas hamadar b'din. So this sounds like a pretty good raya to Rav Halacha. We have brisa where Rav Yaakov is basically saying that there is at least some hechatimsa somewhere where a kefel can equal a chomesh. How in the world can that be? It must be where you had an item that devalued, and when we value the chomesh, we look at the keren, which we look at the prior value. And when we look at the kefel, we look at it kshas amad b'din. So that's the raya. But Amar Rav says, I'm not impressed. I don't think it's muchal this way. La'olam dmei kar shabya arba v'hashtanami shabya arba. Really, I'll tell you that this is an item that there was no price fluctuation. It was worth 4 before, it's worth 4 now. Now you had your kasha, kfela, dalid, chumsha, zuza. You had your kasha, then why are the two amounts the same? Kfela should be dalid, and the choma should be 1. Because for whatever reason, this guy took like 4 shvuas. I don't know why, but this guy, they kept asking to take a shvua. He kept taking a shvua. He did it 5 times or 4 times, whatever it is. And the Torah says that when you have to pay your chomesh, you can do it more than 1 time. For whatever reason, this guy took like 4 shvuas. Therefore, his chomesh is ultimately equal the kefel. But it's not because of price fluctuations. Again, Rav is just saying it's not muchach your raya, but whatever it is. Okay, but before the Gemara moves on, we just want to tie up a few loose ends, which is there were 3 shitas in that brisa, right? We focus right now on Rav Yaakov, but there were 2 other shitas as well, the Chachamim and Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. And the Chachamim said that you're not going to be chayiv the chomesh. Why are you not going to be chayiv the chomesh? Because you're only chayiv the chomesh when you have to pay the keren. When you're paying kefel, you're no longer chayiv the chomesh, but you are still chayiv to bring the carbon asham. And Rav Shimon Bar Yochai said, not only are you putter from the chomesh, you're also putter from the carbon asham if you're not paying the keren. Meaning, if you're paying the keren, that's when you pay the chomesh, and that's when you bring the carbon asham. If you're paying kefel, then you don't pay the chomesh and you don't bring the carbon. So we're going to go back and forth and understand the shittas Chachamim and Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. So Amar Mar, let's just finishing off this bryce from the top of the page. Chachamim Omrim berosho v'chamishi so mamanamishalim berosh most of chomesh. You're only going to pay the chomesh when you're paying the keren. Maman she'ein mishalim berosh, but when you're paying the kefel, ain most of chomesh. Aval asham ma'isi, but you do bring the carbon asham. Ma'ishna chomesh delo. Why is it that I don't bring the why that I don't have to pay the chomesh? Delo mishalim. Dichsiv berosho v'chamishi sav. The Torah connects berosho, which is the keren, and the chomesh, right? V'chamishi sav. But the Gemara says, asham nami lo mishalim. Dichsiv berosho v'chamishi sav. The es ashama, right? You should also not have to pay the asham, because if you look at the pasuk says, right, shile moso berosha v'chamishi sav, there's 2 more words, and then the very first words of the next pasuk is the es ashamo. So the same way that the Torah seems to connect the chomesh to berosho, it also seems to connect the asham, right? So why do you see? Why is there a chiluk between when you pay the chomesh and when you have to bring the carbon asham? But Amir Rabbanan, the Rabbanan will answer, Es Paske Kra. How do you compare? The Asham is in the very next pasuk, and there's a word, it says Es, there's a separation. Berosho Bachamishi Sav, it's the next word, right? But then the Es Ashamo is later on. So there's a hefsek. So I don't see the same connection. Rav Shimon ben Yochai, how does he respond to that? Because Rav Shimon ben Yochai clearly does think that there is some connection between the Asham and Barosho. He says, Ve'et arbe kra. You're right, there is a bit of a separation, but there's also a vav at the beginning of the word es. Ve'es kind of ties the asham to the previous topic, and therefore he says that the same way the chomesh is only paid when it's Barosho, when you pay the keren, so too you only bring the carbon asham when you're paying the keren. But the Gemara says, V'rabanan, Amri lach, lo lichta brachmana lo vav, v'lo es. What are you talking about? It's in a different pasuk. The Torah wanted to combine them. Just don't separate them and then give me a vav. Just don't separate them. Just keep them in the same pasuk. Keep them all connected, right? From the fact that the Torah put them in a separate pasuk, that shows you that there is some sort of difference between the keren and the asham. No. Es lo sagid lo kastav. We needed to separate the 2 ideas. Lafsuke be mamon gavoa la mamon hedya. The bottom line is these are different concepts. The asham is mamon gavoa, right? That's a carbon, and the chomesh is mamon hedya. So therefore, we needed to separate them. We needed to have them in different psukim. So we needed to separate them with the s. Hilkach asavav arbe kra. So the pasuk needed to separate them. At the same time, I wanted to show you that there is a connection, so it added a vav. So again, a bit of a technical machlokas between the Chacham and Rav Yochai in this halacha, right? Am I chayiv to bring a carbon asham if I'm paying kefal or not? Rav Yochai says no. I only am chayiv the carbon asham if I'm paying the keren, not if I'm paying the kefal. The Rabbanan disagree. Okay. Now we're going to move on to a bit of a new topic, which has to do with when a Ganav steals, right? Is he kona the item with certain shinuis, shinui maisa, shinui hashem, things like that. Okay. Amar Rav Ilah. Rav Ilah said this chiddush, right? He said this halacha. Ganav tle vinasa ayil. If he steals a lamb, and the lamb grows up a little bit, I don't know how long it takes to go from a lamb to a ram, right? But some amount of time, right? Or egel vinasa shor. So I steal a calf, now it becomes a shor again. Some sort of time in there. I don't know how much.
13 months in a day.
13 months in a day? All right, very good. That's
Note.
what that's what it
Whoa.
All right, very good. So it takes a while for me to fess up, or maybe not to fess up. But nasa shinui biyado, this change from a tlet to an aisle, from an egel to a shor, this is a shinui in the hand of the ganev, uknao, and he's kona the item, and therefore tavachu machar. If I ultimately shech the animal, I sell the animal, shalohu tavech, shalohu mochar, meaning I'm not going to have to pay the dollar behe. I have now been kona this animal, and I only have to pay because of the shinui. Now this is a big chiddush because I didn't do anything, right? It's just by nature of 13 months in a day, it went from X to Y.
Well, if logic would indicate if you have to pay more because the market value went up, then the value of an egel compared to a shore
presumably
is a lot more. The shore can do work and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I guess the question is, right, I didn't do anything, right? So when I shech this, should I have to pay the dollar behe or not? Now, right? And so let's say I steal, for example, let's say I steal wood from you, and then I fashion a stender. So clearly at that point, I mean, there's no, clearly at that point, I was kona the item and I can't pay you back the stender, I have to pay you back cash, right? Here, I don't know how it works. I steal an egel and now it's a shard. Do I pay you back with a shard? Do I pay you back cash? So here he's saying it's mine to the point where if I shecht it, I don't even owe you the dollar behe, right? I just pay you cash for what I stole, right? That's a big chiddush, right? Maybe you'd say, I don't know. I mean, if you steal an animal, the animal's still here and you shecht it, you got to pay me dollar behe. No, I was kona the animal with this shinui of it becoming a different. Well, we'll see if it's a shinui hashem. I don't know, but a shinui, and therefore I no longer own the dollar behe. Oh,
Motivates wrangling.
Yeah,
steal an egel and you'll wind up with more value.
Exactly. Well, it's still an avera. It's not a good thing to do. Not recommended.
Yeah.
Either way, Aser Rav Chanina Rabbi Ilah. So Rav Chanina hears this chiddush Rabbi Ilah, and he says, "I have a kasha from a furish brisa. The brisa says as follows: Ganav klev v'nasa ayil, egel v'nasa shar. Exactly the same case. Mishalem tashlume kevel for tashlume arba v'chamisha. I do have to pay the kevel. I do have to pay the arba v'chamisha. Ke'ein shagana. And I even have to pay ke'ein shagana. But Avisal kedaita kan yivshinui. And if you're going to tell me that you were kona this item with a shinui, amay mishalim, why do I have to pay? Shalohu tovech, shalohu mocher. Just like we said, I shouldn't have to pay the dollar behe. The Ganev just shechted his own animal because he should have been kona with this shinui. So this is the mafurish of brisa keneged this chiddush of Rabbi Ilah. Now, one thing that's worth pointing out, right? The first thing, the way we started the daf was Rav said a halacha, and he said that when you shecht an animal or whatever it is, and you have to pay the dollar behe, we value the dollar behe not kishas haganev, but kishas hamar bedin. And this brisa seems to go head on in conflict with that halacha of Rav, because it says not only do you pay the dollar behe, you pay the dollar behe ke'ein shagana. The Gemara is going to get to that question. And the Gemara is going to ask on Rav, but over here on Samachava Medalef. So let's just keep that to the side, right? But the more pressing question right now is really on Rabbi Ilah. Rabbi Ilah said a chiddush that when I steal an egel, or I steal a tlet, it becomes an ayil. I steal an egel, it becomes a shar. When I shecht it as a shar, I'm plucked with the dollar behe because shalohu tovech, shalohu mocher. I was kona the item with the shino. The brisa seems to conflict that dead on, right? The brisa says absolutely not. I still, in the same exact case, I have to pay the dollar behe.
But did he say that you have to pay? Did Rob say that you have to pay kefel and dollar behe?
Well, whichever one. I mean, depending.
Not both.
The knas. No. The knas. Whatever the knas is. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So Amar Lei. So this is Rabbi Ilah responding to Rav Chanina, who just brought this brisa.
bid'ah v'hei.
I don't think you pay kefil and daled v'hei. I think it's you pay the kefil or the daled v'hei. Meaning you never pay the daled and the hay, right? It's the kefil or the daled or the hay. It's whichever one is going to be applicable in your circumstance. Either way, let's just move on. So Amar Lay, the Ella, my Shinui, Lokani. So Rabbi Yullah says back to Rabbi Chanina, okay, I hear this price that you're telling me that this Shinui doesn't create a kinyan. So then I'm Mishalim Kain Shagame, Lashalim Kihashta. And he says it's kind of a similar idea to what we spoke about earlier on Amad Aleph, which is if you're telling me that there wasn't this change in the animal doesn't affect a kinyan, then what you're really telling me is it still belongs to the original Baal. So for example, Alan has this animal. I steal this animal from Alan, right? If I'm Kona, fine. But if I'm not Kona, and as long as the animal is in my pen, it's as if it's Alan's animal. Still, I can pay back the animal, right, to Alan. When I shecht it, that's when I did the Gneva, when I shechted the animal, when I stole the animal. And if that's the case, then, and you're telling me that by virtue of the animal growing up and becoming something else, that wasn't a kinyan, why am I chayav to pay back when we calculate the dollar v'hei ke'ein shagana, when I stole the animal from Alan? It should be right now when I shechted the animal. So bishlam, according to me, that I say that the kinyan affects, the change in the animal affects the thing. That's when we calculate the dollar v'hei. I have to do it kashas lagan. But if you're telling me that the shinui itself was not a kinyan, why would I ever have to pay the dollar v'hei kashas haganit? I should have to pay it now kashas ha-tvicha, right? So clearly, what am I proving? Clearly, I'm proving that an animal growing up from a egel to a shor is a kinyan. Let me just find the place. So Amar Lei, so Rav Chanina says back a bit of a cryptic answer. Ki hashta hainu taima delo mishayim. Why do you not have to pay ki hashta? Mishum de Amar Lei, because the Ganav can say Torah ganvi mimcha. Torah ganvi mimcha. I didn't steal an ox from you. Dichra ganvi mimcha. I only stole an egel. So you can't make me pay the value of an ox. I only stole an egel. So Amar Lei, Rabbi Yullah says back to Rab Chanina.
By the way.
Yeah, sometimes they just throw you for a loop a little bit.
Okay.
But Amar Lei, Rahmana Nitzlan Mahai Daitas. We said that's absolutely Rabbon Shalom should help with what you just said. And Amar Lei, Adarabah, Rahmana Nitzlan Daita Dida. Absolutely not. Hashem should help from yours. So they started slinging back insults. But the bottom line is this, right? More fundamentally, the question is like this: you stole Lev and Asa. You stole an Egel and Asa Shar. Rabbi Yulah's view of the world is when the animal grows up, that's a shinui, that creates a kinyan, and therefore the ganev was kona the item, and you no longer have to pay daled v'hei. Rab Chanina says, I don't think the shinui was enough of a kinyan. If the shinui wasn't enough of the kinyan, then why am I only paying kashas ganev? Why am I not paying like it is right now? So he says, no. It is a little bit of a shinui. Meaning it's not a lot of a shinui, but it's a little bit of a shinui. And this is where they're really going back and forth. Right, Rabbi Yullah is saying that's wild to me. If it's a shinui, it's a shinui. Rabbi Chanina is able to see some sort of like middle ground. It's not enough of a shinui that it's going to create a kinyan, but it is enough of a shinui where at least the Ganav can say, "I'm not paying you the value of the ox. I didn't steal an ox. I stole a tle or an egel, whatever it is." Right. So that's kind of the discussion. So again, this is a very hard. You can clearly see why people can spend a lot of time in yeshiva going through this, but that seems to be what's going on over here. There's a bit of a debate. You can also see why Yoel left this week. Yeah, exactly. When he texted me on Thursday, he said, "I know you're the last person you want to see a text from right now in the middle of Meruba." But that seems to be what's happening over here. But one thing, let's just come up for breath for a second. We haven't actually answered the real question, which is Rabbi Yullah said a chiddush. When I steal a tle and it becomes an aisle, I'm not chayav daled v'hei. Rabbi Chanina brought him a brisa that seemed to contradict that head on. I stole a tle, it became an aisle, I am chayav to pay the daled v'hei. They just then had a little bit of a dispute about whatever, exactly how shinui works and what shinui is enough to be kona. But still, Rabbi Yullah, when it's all said and done, is going to have to answer up this brisa, right? But before we get there, we now have another question, which is fine. Maybe the shinui from becoming an egel to a shar isn't enough. But what about the shinui Hashem? We all know that it was called an egel, and I was called a shar. Shouldn't that be enough to affect a kinyan? So the Gemara says, Masklar of Zera, v'nikninu b'shinui Hashem. Fine, the fact that the animal itself grew up, maybe that's not enough. But what about the fact that its name is different? It was an egel, and now it's a shar. So Amar Rava, shar. But passively.
Your answer, I mean.
He says it 13 months in a day is what our scroll says. But yeah, apparently there is some sort of physical difference. But again, there's definitely a concept of a shinoi maisa where the god of something be a dime. Here it was done passively. That's kind of the question. Where it's done, where no one, it was just in my pen for a year. I mean, I guess I was feeding it, but I haven't really done anything be a dime. Does that affect the change? So now what the Gemara is saying is fine. Granted, you might think that a passive change like that doesn't work. What about the shinoi Hashem? Clearly, everyone should agree that when there's a shinoi Hashem, that alone should affect the kinyan. So Amar Rava, shar ben yomo karu shoer. I can give you an example from a pasuk that even a shar ben yomo is still called a shar. An ayil ben yomo karui ayil. And even an ayil who's only a day old, the Torah doesn't always refer to it as a tle, it refers to it as an ayil. Shar ben yomo karu shar. I have an example of a day old shar being called a shar. Dichsiv shar o kesev o eiz ki valed. Right. So this is something that we're a little familiar with. Right? The day it's born, the Torah still calls it a shar. Ayil ben yomo karu ayil. And what's the example? So this is Yaakov talking to Lavan. The elate son chalo achalti. Yaakov is telling Lavan, I did not eat any of your elim. Elim hudlo achal, kvasam achal. What's he trying to say? Once it turned 13 months, that's when I stopped eating it. Was he trying to say that I didn't eat it? But maybe I ate it when they were babies? No, of course not. El lav shnamina. Ayil ben yomo karu ayil. The point is saying even from the time it was a baby, I didn't eat it. So the point is, even very young ayils or tles, the Torah sometimes doesn't call an ayil. Therefore, Rav is saying it's not a real shinui Hashem, because even when it was a day old, it's still called a shar and still called an ayil. But again, the Gemara says, Mikol Malkum Kasha. Bottom line, this is all a nice digression. We really have a kasha, right? Rabbi Ilah had a fetish. You steal a plet, it becomes an ayil, you no longer have to pay dalad mehe. You steal an egel, it becomes a shar, you no longer have to pay dalad mehe. There was a Mefurish Brisa that said that when you steal a plat and you steal an egel, you have to pay the dalad mehe. So what's he going to do with this Brisa? So Amar Sheishes Hamani Beis Shammai. Really, I'll tell you, it's a machlokas tanaim, and that Brisa is the view of Beis Shammai, the Amar Shinoi b'makom o medes, who says that a shinoi, even notwithstanding a shinoi, stays in the original, rishus below kani. Titania, we have a Brisa. This is a completely separate discussion, but we'll see Beis Shammai's view. So this is in the context of Esnan Zona, right? The pasuk says that when it comes to an Esnan Zona and a Mecher Kelev, those items can no longer go on the Mizbech. So Natan La Be'etnena, you give a Zona as her wage, Chitin, Vasan Sola. So you give her Chitin and she makes flour out of it. Zeisim Vasan Shemen, Anavim Vasan Yain. These are all things that in theory can go on the Mizbech, right? So Tani Chada Aser, we have one brisa that says Aser, but Tani Chada Mutter, and one brisa that says once there's a change, then the flour and the wine and the whatever that can go on the mizbeach. The Amar of Yosef, Tani Urin Dim Sporek, this is the name of a person. He says that Beis Shammai Ocean, Beis Hillel Matirin. Say that Beis Shammai is the one that's Oser, and Beis Hillel is Matir. My time with the Beis Shammai. What is the reason for Beis Shammai? B'chsiv Gam l'Rabo Shinuayim. So I happen to not have the pasuk on the side of my Gemara, which is annoying, but the pasuk says at the end of that pasuk says Ki Toavas Hashem. I think it's like Gam Shneim. And the word Gam is extra. Does anyone have a pasuk on the side? Ki Toavas Hashem Elokecha Gam Shneim. So Gam l'Rabos Shinuayim. So Beis Shammai says that the word Gam comes to include even the shinuis that you do to the Esnan Zona. Beis Hillel says Hem, meaning Shnehem. The word Hem, or the two letters at the end of the word Shnehem. Hem below shinu ehem. He says no, it's dafka these items, but not any of the shinuis. Beis Shammai, what does he do with his hem? Who hem below vladosam, right? If you give a zona, an animal, so any of the offspring, that won't be included in this thing. Who to asa? Beis Hillel, Beis Hillel says, I just hold that hem works for both. Hem below shinu ehem and hem below vladosam. But the Gemara says, just to tie up one loose end, Beis Hillel. Gam, right? According to Beis Hillel, there's also this word Gam. What does he do with Gam? The Gemara says Gam, the Beis Hillel kasha. You're right. He's going to have to answer that up. So when we learn that sugya, we'll have to understand what Beis Hillel does. But what's the bottom line? The bottom line is we have a machlokas hanayim. about how do we view shinuis in general. Beis Shammai takes a much more, I don't know if it's permissive, I'm a little lost. But the point is, Beis Shammai says he doesn't view shinui as mattering that much, as affecting a kinyan. Beis Hillel holds it does. So the brisa that Rav Chanina brought that said that when you steal egel and it becomes a shar, you still have to pay the dollar behag. That's Shitas Beis Shammai. But Rab Ilah was going with Shitas Beis Hillel that says so long as there is a change in the animal, you are acquiring the animal, and therefore you're no longer going to have to pay the dollar behag. But we spoke out right in the beginning when we learned this brisa that is now Shitas Beis Shammai. We said it head on. It conflicts with Rav. Why? Because Rav said Allah, which is how we opened the daf at the top of Samachem and Aleph. And he said that whenever you're chayav the dollar behei, you always pay the dollar behei kishas hamada bedin. But this brisa seems to say that when you pay the dollar behei, you're paying it kishas haganeva. So forget Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. This is something that is a kasha on Rav. So that's what the Gemara is about to ask. Ad kan lo pligi ela de marsavar shinui kona marsavar ain't shinui kona. Aval inyan shlumi. But when it comes to how much you actually have to pay, kuli alma k'mei kara mishalim. Everyone agrees that when you pay, it's kishas hakaneva. Dekani mishalim t'shumi keval t'shumi arba v'chamisha ke'ain shaganim. Leimet havet yufta derav d'amar rav karen ke'ain shaganav mishalim karen ke'ain shaganav. When you pay back the karen, it's ke'ain shaganav. But t'shumi keval t'shumi dal behei kishas hamada bedin. So bottom line, isn't this brisa a kasha on Rav's halacha? And Amar Rava, he gives an answer which I found very hard to appreciate. Rava said, no, tlaim kidemei kara, damim kishal achshav. Even Rav is going to agree that when this guy, if he wants to pay his dollar behei in livestock, if he wants to pay it in tlaim, that he still has to pay kishas haganav for whatever reason. If he wants to pay cash, then he has to pay kishas hamada bedin. If he wants to pay with livestock, then he can pay kishas haganav. Rashi.
So he can give back to the original owner. He can give him 4 sheep.
4 sheep, yeah. He stole a sheep and he can pay back 4 sheep for whatever, if he's literally paying in sheep. Rashi is a very short Rashi. He just says, Kolomar, Bal Shalim Tlaim K'mei Karasagi. The Tle Ganav Utle Mishalim. All right, so I didn't.
Or lamb.
I don't know. So there's a lengthy-ish Tosfos, which I wasn't able to understand. But I think that's what Tosfos gets into, maybe the svara of exactly what the difference is. But that's how Rava answers up the shaila for Rav. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to move into really the rest of today's daf and a lot of tomorrow's daf. Machlokas Rabba and Rav Yosef about Yush. There's Yush Kona when it comes to a Gana. So how are we doing on time? Not very good. So we'll do what we can, and then we'll pick it up tomorrow. So where are we? Amar Rabba. Shinui Kona. This idea that a Shinui is Kona for a Ganav. Ksiva Vatanina. That I have a source in a pasuk and a source in Mishnah. Ksiva, I have a source in the pasuk. Asher Gaza. The words Asher Gaza are extra. You said you have to return the Gazela. Clearly, it's the Gazela that you stole, right? So Matam Alomar Asher Gazal. Im Ke'ain Shagaza Yachzer. The point is, if the item is still like it was when you stole it, you can just give it back. Im Lav, if it's not, Gamin Ba'alma Ba'ishlumi. Then you are Kona the item and you pay back in cash. Tanina, I also have support for this in a Mishnah. Hagozel Eitzin. If I steal wood, Vasan Kalim, and I made Kalim out of it, Samar Vasan Begadim, Mishalin Kashatz like Gazela. Again, I don't give back the item, I pay cash because I was Kona with the Shinui. Inami, I have another source. This is again not a Ganav, it has to do with Rashis Agaz. So these are one of the Manas Kuhuna. Below Hispik Litno Loa, Yisrael, whatever it is, has the Rashis Agaz he's supposed to give to the Kohen, but he didn't get a chance to give it to him Ashet Savo until he dyed it, so he's some sort of Shinui, right? Potter, you no longer have to pay the Kohen these things. Alma Shinui, Kona. So the bottom line is, when it comes to Shinui, Rabba says, I am convinced that Shinui is Kona. I have sources Midyaraisa, I have sources from Mishnah, it's fine. Yish, what about Yish? So I stole something from the Baal, and now the Baal has given up hope. Amri Rabbanan Denikni. The Rabbanan clearly say that this works, the Kenyan works, when the Baal is Miyash. Miu lo yadinan idiyaraisa Rabbanan. I don't know if this works on a Diyaraisa level or on a Dirabanan level. Idiyaraisa, maybe it's a Diyaraisa, what would be the Svara? Midi Dahava Moti Aveda would be very similar to when a person finds an Aveda. Moti Aveda lav kaven to Miyash Maramina, Mikmeda Tesi Liade. If I find an Aveda and the Baal Aveda gave up hope prior to me finding it, kanile, therefore that affected a Kenyan, his Yush affected my Kenyan. So Hainami, same thing with Geneva. Kema de Miyayish Mara, once the Baal of the item loses hope, kanile, right? So Alma Kani. So maybe it should be the same thing. O Dilma, or maybe you'll say, no, lo damya la Aveda. Why? Because Aveda who asalide behatera asalide. When it comes to an Aveda, it's an obvious chiluk, right? The Aveda, no one did anything wrong. So there, we'll let the Yush be Kona for the Moti Aveda. Aval high, but when it comes to a Gana, it came to be Surah Salide, Midrabanan, who it's not going to work on a Diraisa level, it's only going to work on a Dirabanan level. The Amarabanan, Nikni, Mipneta, Kanas Hashavim. Because there's a svara where the Rabbanan say, we want the guy to be Kona with Yush because of a Takanos Hashavim. What is Takanos Hashavim?
The Gemara is saying that the owner giving up hope that he'll ever recover the article gives me a kingdom?
Yes.
Someone else's act or thought can give me.
Well, it definitely works like that by Motzi Aveda, for sure.
Okay.
What? Yeah, but what would the svara be, right? Why would the Rabbanan even be masaking something like this? So the idea is, Takanos Hashavim, which we'll see a few examples on Amud Beis probably tomorrow. But the idea is something like this. Imagine I steal something in the middle of the summer when the thought of Yom Kippur is not even on my mind, right? Now it's Elul, and now I feel really bad about it. So I want to go, and promise I have no idea where the thing is, right? So if I've got to go find the thing and give you the thing back, I'm going to forget it and just hope that I get kapara some other way. If I'm allowed to just go over to a guy and say, listen, I stole the thing. I feel really bad. Let me just pay you the value. Then maybe I'll go over to you. So the Rabbanan said, you know what? The guy was miyayish already anyway, right? The guy, whoever owned it, was miyayish. Therefore, let's at least give the guy the ability to do kapara, not make it so difficult for him. He's got to chase this thing down. So that would be the svara. So where there was Yush, let's let the guy be Kona just to make it easier for him to get his kapara. That's Mipnei Takanos Hashavim. What's the bottom line? Rabbah said, I know Yush is Kona. I'm just Mesupik, whether it works on a Diraisa level similar to Hashavas Aveda or Motzi Aveda, or is it a Durabanan level? Mipnei Takanos Hashavim. Rav Yosef Amar, Yush Eino Kona Pilu Midrabanan. Rav Yosef says kind of like you. He's like, absolutely not. Like, that's not a thing. Yush is not going to work by a Ghana. And this is really the machlokas, Rabbah and Rav Yosef. Does Yush work to be Kona by Geneva? And that's going to be, again, the rest of Amud Beis. So, eighth year of Yosef the Rabbah. Yosef says Yush does not work, had a kasha on Rabbah. He says, Gazal chametz va'avar leva Pesach. Let's say I stole from someone a very fancy bourbon collection, and it was worth lots and lots of money prior to Pesach. Now Pesach happens. Omer lo harishal chalapanecha. Now it's the day after Pesach. I can walk over to you with fancy bourbon collection, and I can say when I stole it was worth $10,000. Now it's worth bourbon, really fancy bourbon, right? Or any other example of hummus is worth a lot of money. The day after Pesach, I can come over to you and I can give you back your single malt scotch, whatever it is. Now it is worth quite literally zero because the guy, it's asr ba'ana, right? The guy can't drink it and the guy can't even sell it. The guy can do nothing. I can come back and I can say, Harei shel chalaf anecha, done. I have now keshav esak zela shargazal. That's the halacha, right? Rashi gets into the top Rashi. This is heker she'eno nicker. That's that whole sugi over there. Right. Fine. But the point is, what's
the item itself didn't change.
Exactly. Vahai. Hevan de mata idan isura vade miyayish. And Rav Yosef says to Rabbah, this guy who was the victim comes there of Pesach, right? Of course he was miyayish. He knows that there's never going to be any value to this, whatever he had, right? So that
unless the guy sold it.
Well, in the days of the Gemara, they don't really talk a lot about it. I think that's more of a more current concept than I think back in the day. But either way, let's assume no one was selling chametz back in those days. Either way, he was clearly miyayish. And if he was clearly miyayish and yish affected a kinyan, so then Rabbi Yosef is saying to Rabbah like this: from the Ghana's perspective, I'm holding on to thousands of dollars worth of produce, right? If the guy was meaning if it always stayed the property of the nignav, so then it went from $10,000 to $0 in the property of the nignav. I can go back to the nignav and I can say Harei shel chalaf anecha. But if yish affects a kinyan and the guy was clearly miyayish, now it became my property in Erev Pesach when it was worth $10,000. Now it went from $10,000 to zero on my watch. I can't just go over to the guy and give him back his bourbon. I got to cut him a check for $10,000. I was Kona the item, and now if it went down in value, that's on me. Now I got to pay him for the value of which I stole.
But we know that it is actually says called a mirror. I mean, obviously anyone's first comments would be Yayish. You can't say
Yeah.
So by definition, he's going to be Yayish. Therefore, the Isser of buyer of this is going to be kind of. Because it's for sure Yayish. So, because besides the Isser of stealing, he also has the Isser of how much Pesach, because he now owns it. Right.
Yeah, I am assuming both of them did the Kol Chamira. Yeah, I don't know, but the bottom line is, more from a Choshen Mishpah perspective. Rav Yosef is saying clearly this Mishnah says that a guy can give this chametz back to the other guy, and the only way that's going to work, say Arishal Chol Vanecha, is if it was always in the property, it was always the ownership of the victim. But if Yish works, we know the victim clearly wasn't Yayish on this thing. He never had any hope of drinking his bourbon ever again, right? Or the single malt scotch, or whatever our example is. So therefore, it should have become property of the Ganav, and therefore the Ganav shouldn't be able to absolve himself by giving back the scotch. He should have to cut him a check. This is a proof that Yish does not work to be Kona. That's Rav Yosef's raya to Rabbah. Now, Bisal Kadadach Yish Kona, Amai Omer Lo Areshal Kalafanecha, Dame Ma'alya Bayishlumla. He's got to pay him cash. So Amar Le, Rabbah will say back, no. Kika Amina Ana, Zemis Yayish, is that Rosalik knows. The only way Yish is going to affect the Kinyan is where the other guy wants to be Kona the item, right? But hi, Zemis Yayish, is that Ein Rosalik knows. What is the other guy? What's he going to do with all this bourbon? Arab Pesach. Again, let's assume we're in a situation where selling wasn't a thing. I think that's a little bit more of a modern concept. So back before people sold the chametz, what's this guy going to do with the bourbon? He doesn't want it. So Rabbah saying, I only hold that a guy can be Kona with Yish if he wants to be Kona. But this guy didn't want to be Kona. So of course.
We're assuming he's from, they won't drink it after.
No.
I'm saying we're assuming he's from, he's not.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't care about how much of the environment.
Yeah, you're right.
It's not that important, seemingly.
Why is halacha being so considerate of how the Ganav is Kona an item? Wouldn't it have been smarter if halacha would have said, as a Ganav, you can never be Kona the item, and it always stays in limbo, and you still have a chet?
No. Clearly, we are not focusing on chet right now. The guy had an avera, and he definitely has to. But he also has certain mitzvos, right? Yeah, he's got to return.
Oh, and I couldn't.
He's got to return.
No,
well, the problem is this was the Takana Sashavim that we were talking about in Amid Aleph, right? We'll stop here and we'll pick it up and we'll try to make up some ground, throughout the week. Yoel doesn't come back till Friday, so we have some time to make it up. But the idea is, I'm just going to stop the recording.